Imagine an emergency room where a doctor could scan a critically ill patient in an instant and know his or her entire medical history. It's an idea that could save lives, also could get under your skin. Welcome to the future. Like 2 million other Americans, Denise is an epileptic. When a seizure strikes suddenly, the doctors in the ER need answers, and fast. Now imagine a device that could tell them all they need to know about any medical condition you have in a matter of minutes, at any hospital, anywhere in the world. Sound far-fetched? It's closer than you think.
On a typical day, patients come in with heart attacks, strokes, major trauma, with cancer patients and septic shock. You name it, we have it.
What might improve the odds for some of those patients at New Jersey's Hackensack University Medical Center is this. That tiny chip Dr. Joseph Feldman, head of the hospital's trauma unit, holds in his hand. It's a radio frequency identification, or RFID tag.
This is a man-made motor, a motor so small that more than 6,000 of them would fit on the head of a pin. Welcome to the world of the nanometer, a unit of measure that is 1/billionth of a meter.
A nanometer is pretty small. One of the best analogies that I like to use is to compare it with a human hair. If you take a hair off of the top of your head, you can see that it's very thin. And now if you take something that's 100,000 times thinner than that, that's a nanometer.
The ability to observe and construct things this small is at the heart of nanotechnology.
This compromise guarantees more than $2 trillion in deficit reduction. It's an important first step to ensuring that as a nation we live within our means. Yet it also allows us to keep making key investments in things like education and research that lead to new jobs, and assures that we're not cutting too abruptly while the economy is still fragile. This is, however, just the first step. This compromise requires that both parties work together on a larger plan to cut the deficit, which is important for the long-term health of our economy. And since you can't close the deficit with just spending cuts, we'll need a balanced approach where everything's on the table. Yes, that means making some adjustments to protect healthcare programs like Medicare so they're there for future generations. It also means reforming our tax code so that the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations pay their fair share. And it means getting rid of taxpayer subsidies to oil and gas companies and tax loopholes that help billionaires pay a lower tax rate than teachers and nurses. I've said it before, I will say it again, we can't balance the budget on the backs of the very people who have borne the biggest brunt of this recession. Everyone's going to have to chip in. In the last few months, the economy's already had to absorb an earthquake in Japan, the economic headwinds coming from Europe, the Arab Spring and the rise in oil prices, all of which have been very challenging for the recovery. But these are things we couldn't control.
With astonishing dexterity, a monkey reaches out to grab and turn a handle with a robotic arm controlled not by its hands, but directly by its brain. With the power of thought, it can alter the speed and direction of the arm, twisting the joints to home in on its target. It shows no signs of distress from the wires leading from electrodes in its brain to a computer. Sky News was given exclusive access to the lab at the University of Pittsburgh to see just how close scientists are to helping paralyzed patients. Human trials are likely to start next year.
And it's very small, and it doesn't bother you at all, but it certainly is going to allow you to identify who you are, protect your child. If you have a new child that's born in a nursery, you can protect that child from having somebody walk off on it. You can also protect your loved ones in a nursing home so that you can put a bracelet on and identify that individual and be able to find that individual if that person wanders away. But I certainly would, and I think it's a coming thing. And the problem is that medical technology technology is so far behind that RFIDs are going to really be the impetus in order for us to get new technology in the medical field that's going to help people improve their quality of care, and that's what it's all about.
And I'm sorry, sir, did you just say you would get one implanted in your arm?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
I have to admit, it makes me a little queasy, makes me worry. What happens if it gets dislodged? Am I being irrational?
No, but just think of this. Now, if you were, wherever you are, if you're traveling, you're in New Jersey now and you're interviewing me in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Can you imagine if you were in Washington, D.C. and had an accident or had a stroke and went into the hospital, how long would it be before your records could get down here? How long would it take to be able to find out what sort of meds you're on or what allergies you have or what are you allergic to? And the problem is that technology is so far behind in the medical field that people are dying every day because of the lack of technology. The 98,000 people died last year because of mistakes in hospitals and clinics across America. And a good share of those mistakes could have been prevented by technology. RFID is at the cutting edge of new technology, is going to help to improve the quality of health and the quality of care for all Americans.
The privacy issue associated with RFID technology really disappears because Verichip is a voluntary product that is used by a patient for specific medical ailments, such as dementia, such as medical device recipients that need to identify their devices and their medical records, such as cardiac care patients and diabetic patients as well, who will voluntarily receive a Verichip.
How many people have these embedded in them? I shouldn't say embedded, but put in them.
We've sold approximately 7,000 Verichips across the world right now. We believe that 2,000 of them approximately have been injected across the world, either for the medical or the security application.
For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present nor things to come, nor height nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord.
And the fact is that every day that passes, Iran gets closer and closer to nuclear bombs. Now, if Iran knows that there's no red line, if Iran knows that there's no deadline, what will it do? Exactly what it's doing. It's continuing without any interference towards obtaining nuclear weapons capability and from there nuclear bombs.
And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth.
And what scientists have discovered is that at the nanometer scale, everyday materials start to act in unimaginable ways. For Jeffrey Grossman, a UC Berkeley nanoscientist working with the National Science Foundation, that's exactly the draw.
The behavior of nanomaterials changes, or can change, when the size becomes so small when compared with a larger amount of that same material. When you have things that sort of start changing the way they behave, and now you have the ability to control that, it sort of opens up an entirely new phase space of material.
The fact that you can customize nanomaterials' unique behaviors has already turned nano into the buzzword of the decade. Some researchers predict nanotechnology could lead to faster computer chips, tiny medical devices that repair clogged arteries.
We have the ability to look on the nanoscale and see what's happening. Every time you chop the material in two, say you go from a crystal that's 100 atoms across to 50 to 25, each time you do that, almost all the properties of the material really change.
But now if you take out your little nano ice cream scooper and you scoop out a nano-sized chunk of that material and you look at that, all of a sudden it glows blue. And if you take a slightly bigger ice cream scooper out, it glows red. And so now you have a material that completely changes the way it looks, the color that it is, just by changing its size.
So the question is, why do nanomaterials behave so strangely? In the case of the nano ice cream scoop, the behavioral change happens when you start to make a material so tiny that its electrons are squeezed into a space smaller than they prefer. It's called quantum confinement.
And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom, that him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
The webbing between my thumb and the index finger.
Can you? He wrote his book, and then after about a year of seeing all the cool projects, I decided to do it myself.
Now, can you see this little thing implanted in your skin?
Yeah, you can a little bit. You can kind of see it just underneath the skin there. It's rare. I mean, some people who get them done, you can't see it.
It looks just like a tiny little bump.
Yeah, just a little bump.
Do you have one of the chips there, Jennifer? Oh, there, I see, we see it now. Yeah, it's what, look, about a quarter of an inch, half an inch long?
Yeah, it's about half an inch.
How many
cylinder there?
How many people have done this?
Well, since doing it in March, there's been a small community around the world have cropped up.
Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb."
Now imagine a device that could tell them all they need to know about any medical condition you have in a matter of minutes at any hospital anywhere in the world. Sound far-fetched? It's closer than you think.
On a typical day, patients come in with heart attacks, strokes, major trauma, with cancer patients.
Imagine an emergency room where a doctor could scan a critically ill patient in an instant and know his or her entire medical history. It's an idea that could save lives, also could get under your skin. Welcome to the future. Like 2 million other Americans, Denise is an epileptic. When a seizure strikes suddenly, the doctors in the ER need answers. And
so small that more than 6,000 of them would fit on the head of a pin. Welcome to the world of the nanometer, a unit of measure that is 1/billionth of a meter.
A nanometer is pretty small. One of the best analogies that I like to use is to compare it with a human hair. If you take a hair off of the top of your head, you can see that it's very thin. And now if you take something that's 100,000 times...
A septic shock, you name it, we have it.
What might improve the odds for some of those patients at New Jersey's Hackensack University Medical Center is this. That tiny chip Dr. Joseph Feldman, head of the hospital's trauma unit, holds in his hand. It's a radio frequency identification, or RFID tag.
This is a man-made motor. A motor
thinner than that, that's a nanometer.
The ability to observe and construct things this small is at the heart of nanotechnology.
This compromise guarantees more than $2 trillion in deficit reduction. It's an important first step to ensuring that as a nation we live within our means. Yet, it also allows us to keep making key investments in